Welcome everyone. I'm Jeannie and I'm going to be doing foundational foods today. So this is a natural healing and cooking class. I am a teacher for UCSD. I work with Gordon Sachs. I'm on his team for the research study groups, and I'm also one of the lead teachers for the natural healing and cooking program at the University of California in San Diego. I love my job. I get to teach people how to turn around degenerative conditions by simply learning how to cook and get embraced with natural healing foods. So today I'm going to show you a couple of just simple recipes that honestly, the recipe is something you're going to create on your own. We're going to take some basic cooking techniques and make these really powerful medicinal foods with just some simple ingredients and just some cooking time. And I know I've got people from all different levels of cooking here, but one thing I always find fun is that from different teachers, I pick up different tips and tricks. So even if you're a really advanced chef in the kitchen and stuff like that, we might talk about some energy and stuff today in food too that might interest you. So I think I might have a little bit for everybody for our crowd today. So let's jump in. One of the first dishes I'm going to do is something that Gordon Sachs talked about in his lecture earlier today. I'm going to do a dish that is based on those 5 pillars of health and healing. So I'm going to make a dish that's organic. I'm going to use seasonal and local ingredients to create it for the most part. There's going to be some fermented stuff in there that might not be local, but we'll get into that. I'm going to use a balance in the overall dish that I'm creating. I'm going to also take into consideration that it's a whole food in its whole form. So I'm not going to use a refined grain to create a dish from a flour product. I'm going to use those whole grains in the whole form. So the dish we're going to make today is congee. And that is a traditional medicinal dish that's been around for a really long time. We see it coming from the Orient, and typically it's made with brown rice, but you can make congee with pretty much any whole grain, and you can also mix in different whole grains to create new varieties of your congee. Basically what congee is it's a long cooked whole grain dish that is really easy to digest because those complex carbohydrates have had the opportunity with a nice long cook to break down, so they become very easy to digest and absorb and assimilate. So that's why this is such a medicinal food, because it comes from those 5 pillars of health, all of that taken into consideration, a whole plant-based source for healing that's organic in its whole form. So the first thing I did was, and I have the best assistant in the world for my cooking classes. My husband, Patrick, is going to change camera views. So I can show you over here what I did to start off my congee. And typically when I cook grains and beans, I will soak them. Now, when you're making a congee, you're going to long cook it anyway. So you don't really need to soak your grain to make this dish. But if you're someone who's new to eating whole grains and you're finding them a bit hard to digest, soaking can be a game changer for you, because that soaking helps to start breaking it down, making it easier to digest. It's softening it really a bit and making it easier for you to then do your part of the process of digestion. So soaking can be beneficial if you're having a rough time with grains, but you don't have to soak it for a congee, because we are going to do a long cook. But I'll be honest with you, if someone's very weak and they are on a healing diet, and they're bedridden, really sick, trouble with digestion, I will soak my grains for my congee and still do the long cook. The more and easier you make that to digest, the more benefits a person's going to get out of it. So this in here, you'll see in with my grain and with the bean that I soaked. I soaked some beans. I'm going to actually throw some beans into my congee too. This is something that I just, it's kind of a little personal twist. Started doing it a few years ago and really found even more benefits out of that congee. I have soaked here in this one dish. These are adzuki beans, which are really good for tonifying and strengthening the kidneys. So if you want nice bright eyes, get rid of those bags under the eyes, you're pulling some water in those kidneys, this can be really help with tonifying. So as you can see, as I'm soaking these adzuki beans, my water has changed color. Before I soak adzuki beans, or any beans, after I soak them, and before I go to cook them, I'm gonna get rid of that soaking water. So to start this congee off, I'm gonna go ahead and take and put in my pot here my brown rice that I have soaked, and I'm using a short grain brown rice here. Actually, that's a golden rose, I believe. It looks pretty short though for a golden rose. Yeah, so it's a medium grain, but it's kind of short in actual size in and of itself. And then I'm gonna take the beans and I'm gonna get rid of that soaking water. We never wanna hold on to that soaking water. It adds to that gas factor that people have issues with eating beans. So if we soak the beans and toss out the soaking water and put fresh water in when we cook beans, then we have a better chance of not getting as gassy. And also, if you're having trouble digesting beans as you're moving over to a more plant-based diet, something that I highly recommend to people is chew, 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 chew. The enzymes you need for digestion are here in your mouth, in that saliva. Use it. These are your grinding tools. Mash up that food. It should be liquid when swallowed. That's the most efficient way to get what you want out of your food. And beverages. We should chew those too. Let them mix with your saliva. So I've strained my adzuki beans. I'm now throwing those in the pot. And you'll notice I have, with my grains and my beans, when I was soaking, there's a piece of seaweed in here. So this sea vegetable that we have is kombu. And kombu, when we soak it with grains and beans, can be very beneficial for helping to relax that hard bean and that hard grain, make it easier to cook, also make it easier to digest. There's a lot of good minerals in here, phytonutrients, helps with the overall cooking of the grains and beans. So that's in the pot. Now, something else I like to throw in when I'm doing a healing congee. I come from a standard American diet, and I've eaten pretty healthy for the last 20 years that I've been doing. Basically started off with a macrobiotic protocol and been doing it through the years as the basis of my nutrition. But I'm married to a professional French chef. So I have a tendency to overeat or get into the decadent things a little more than I should sometimes. And this here is really good for moving fat deposits in the body. So you want to do some liver cleansing, these kinds of things. This is daikon. And this here is daikon in the actual dried form. So in the dried form, it's even more concentrated and stronger. Regular daikon is a root vegetable that looks like a giant carrot, but it's white. It's really a radish. And it too has this amazing ability to kind of soften, harden masses in the body, like cysts and things like that, hard saturated fat deposits, and it helps to kind of soften them so that your body can break them down and move them. So naturally heal itself. So in healing protocols, we see daikon, the radish family, onions, these root vegetables that help to move things quite frequently. And daikon can be used to help with saturated fat deposits. And another strong version of it is the dried form. So I like to throw some of the dried form in my congee right from the very beginning. So I have in here some grain, whole grain brown rice. I have some adzuki beans. I have some dried daikon, and I have some kombu. Now, I admit Everyone has their favorite way to cook a congee. Some people will start off with congee with a full pot of water and slowly cook it down over time. I have found one way that I like to really get it all broken down and really super creamy is I start off with less water to begin with, about the same amount that I would cook with a whole grain. So whenever I cook a whole grain, no matter what kind of whole grain it is, no matter what size pot, and no matter how much grain I have, I always put in 1 knuckle, which is about 1 inch, over the top of the grain level in the pot. I put that much water. Every time, grain turns out perfect. No matter if I'm cooking for 100 people or if I'm cooking for 2. No matter how big or small the pot, no matter how much or how little the grain, just over the top of that grain level, a knuckle over the top of water, comes out great. Another way to guarantee great grain too is one of these guys. So if you're cooking whole grains and you're struggling with whole grains, you just can't get that brown rice right, you got bottom rice, your quinoa's burning and sticking, you forget it's on the stove, you didn't hear the timer, whatever's going on, this little thing here called a flame tamer can change your world when it comes to whole grains. It simply goes under the pot after we brought it to a boil, and I'll show you the process here. And it's going to diffuse the flame so that we get a nice low cooking temperature, evenly distributed under the bottom of the pot. So even if you leave it on the stove a little too long, it can't burn. The flame has been diffused. So you don't get that bottom rice. You're not scraping your grain out of the bottom of the pot when you're going to clean your pots because it didn't stick in the first place. So this little investment, you can find these online. They're called flame diffusers or flame tamers or heat diffuser or heat flame tamer, variety of names. Most of them start off with a beautiful wood handle like this one as we see here, but slowly over time the wood handle burns off and this gets an ugly color and we end up with a more rustic version of a well-loved flame tamer that looks like this. So big difference, right? Well-loved. So on the stove over here, I have already started a pot of congee with the same ingredients in it. I brought it to a boil, and that's the first process of cooking a congee. We're going to put that over here on the flame and get it going. Whenever you go to cook a whole grain, whenever you go to cook a bean from a dried state, whenever you go to do that, the process is always the same. We're going to rinse it, we're going to soak it or not soak it. If it's a lentil or an azuki bean, those don't need to be soaked. But for the most part, the process once it goes to the stove, it's always the same. Over high flame, bring to a boil. The beans, if they foam, you skim off the foam. Grains won't do that. You won't have to worry about that. But with the beans, you want to get that foam off of there because when you take the foam off, that again helps with that gas factor. Okay, think of those bubbles in the foam. Some of it on really fresh beans that have been dried can get pretty thick, like shaving cream on top. You remove that off of your beans, continue to cook them at a lower temperature once they stop foaming. And it's amazing just by removing that too, how it can help with the digestibility of those beans as far as the gassiness goes. So another thing you can do to get used to eating beans. Now, please note, many of us who are used to a standard American diet are not used to eating beans. But as you introduce them to your diet, over time, your body will get used to those. So if you're eating some beans and just getting gassy and uncomfortable, maybe use less beans, eat smaller amounts, chew really, really well, soak them, get rid of the soaking water, cook them when they go to foam, get rid of that foam, chew them really well, and over time, your body will literally learn how to digest them and make the arrangements it needs to in your digestive tract so you can have a comfortable experience eating beans. They're an excellent, excellent, excellent source of protein without baggage. Animal products come with baggage. They come with insoluble fibers. They come with things that are just basically polluting your system, messing with your hormones. And a healing diet, we don't see animal products for the most part. Sometimes we do in very specific protocols, but that's few and far between. And you really want to work with somebody who really knows diet to specialize that, because for the most part, to sustain a more alkaline blood quality, to be in a state of self-healing, we want primarily a plant-based diet, because for the most part, those plant-based foods are creating a more alkaline blood quality that helps sustain self-healing. So my grain and bean here has already come up to a boil, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn it down to low. Always the same for grains and beans. Turn them down to low, put a cover on them. We're going to let it simmer. I'm going to go ahead and add that flame tamer to this pot so I get a nice low, slow simmer. And I always like to warm up one side of the flame tamer and then the other. And over here on the other burner, this is a congee that I started about an hour ago. So I could get ahead of it a little bit, because I want to show you guys how I cook it down to make it creamy. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of bubbles on my water here, so I turn my flame up just a little bit. I'm going to add some water to the pot, and I'm going to do it right along the edge. This is called shocking the pot. We add it along the edge so that we're not going to lose our boil. And I'm going to hold on to that boil. And I'm going to add a bunch more water and finally give this a stir. But I'm going to add a little bit at a time to get this to break down. Because it's hot out right now. I'm breaking it down a little bit quicker. During the winter time, if you're making a congee and it goes for hours and hours on the stove on a low flame, that's great. But for a lot of us right now with this ongoing heat wave and the rest of it, we want to get the cooking done a little quicker. So this is a method to kind of move things along a little faster. And I've increased my flame to get this rolling here at a boil again. But what I'm looking for is I want it to get really nice and creamy. Start breaking down. Once it gets nice and creamy, towards the end of cooking, like the last 15-20 minutes, I can go ahead and add some fresh vegetables to it. So what I often do when I'm making congees, and let's say I'm going to eat a congee a few days in a row, I'll make the base of the congee with the grain and the seaweed and maybe some dried shiitake mushrooms. Mushrooms are so good for cleansing and healing and nurturing. I'll cook it down for a long time, and then when I get to the point of putting in the fresh vegetables, I'll take out what I'm going to store and then add the fresh vegetables to what I'm going to eat that day. That way the base is already done. You've done some batch cooking. And each day your congee could be a little bit different. Let's say tomorrow I'm having a really stressful day. I need to relax a little bit. And I decide that that day's congee, I'm going to add some of the sweet vegetables and make a more sweet version of a congee using kabocha squash and onion, maybe some corn, carrot, cabbage, so that it relaxes me more. That kind of a sweet congee is great for when I'm stressed. And we threw some azuki beans in this congee too, so we're going to be giving those kidneys some good strength in that too to help tonify the adrenals, keep us alert. This is going to be a really nurturing dish. And you can have fun with it. You can play around with congees, try different grains. Maybe brown rice is your base, but you throw in some quinoa to go in with that too. Or try a whole congee with just quinoa. Quinoa will take a little longer to break down to get creamy, but you can make amazing porridges with pretty much any whole grain. And those complex carbohydrates and protein and all those phytonutrients that you're getting from the whole grain, that's nurturing self-healing food. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk a bit about is doing greens. Most of us are not getting a lot of greens, and if you are, great, you're already there. But for a lot of us, we're getting greens kind of sporadically here and there. And really for a healing diet, we want to see greens 2-3 times a day. And when I talk about greens, what does that mean? Well, I'm talking about the hardy greens. I'm talking about kale and collards. those hearty mixed green salads with all different kinds of vibrant dark greens. Your iceberg lettuce is really good for what its title says it is. It's good for cooling you off. It has a high water content, but not that many vitamins and minerals. In nature, the way that it really works is nature's telling us concentrations by levels of color. For instance, sea vegetables. If I take this sea vegetable here, kombu, which is the sea vegetable that we use to cook our grains and beans with, this is a darker color for a sea vegetable, especially compared to some of those ones that we see in restaurants, those light green seaweed salads. This has more minerals, more nutrients, more vitamins. It gives you more of that full spectrum you're looking for natural healing. So that's why we cook our grains and beans with it. It's about getting those sea vegetables a little bit here, a little bit there in a daily diet on a regular basis to help rejuvenate us. It's about those greens on a daily basis, cleansing and nurturing all those phytonutrients and greens in and of themselves, helping us to get up and go, helping to move things in the digestive tract. You know, a lot of people have trouble these days with things like constipation, and they have trouble getting things moving, and yet we're not moving. We're not walking. We have more sedentary lifestyles these days, and the green family helps to move things within the digestion. The greens help to kind of sweep things along and keep things moving. So we want to eat those. I like to think green means go. But we also want to move the body in and of itself if we want things to move. So if you're suffering from things like constipation and that, go for a walk. It can be really helpful. It doesn't need to be a vigorous walk. It can be a slow, relaxing walk. It's the movement in and of itself that helps with more movement. So what you just saw me really quickly do here was just take these pieces of kale and just pull the stem out and remove the actual green from the stem. Now, the reason I do that is when I go to cook greens, these stems are going to take longer than the leaves themselves. So the stems I'm going to put into boiling water before I go ahead and throw in my actual leaves, because they're going to take longer. And then if I'm cooking stems and leaves in a steamer, what I'll typically do is be rotating the actual leaves, like do a bunch, take them out, do another bunch. So it's only one layer thick, because if you throw a whole bunch of those into a pot all at the same time, what you're going to end up with is a very big bunch of greens that may not be cooked on the inside. It'll cook on both sides, but not really in the middle. So if you just rotate smaller batches through as you're cooking the leaves, you'll find you'll get a nice consistent cooking, and also they don't take very long. Your greens, your tops like that, you know, you're talking like 30 seconds, sometimes even if that long, for them to just shift color to a brighter green than what we have sitting here. Once that shift happens, once you see that bright green, it's time to get them off the heat, out of the steamer, whatever they are, so that they stop cooking. And don't pile them up real thick too, because they'll keep cooking. I kind of just spread them out a little bit and they'll cool off real fast. So when we eat greens like this too, a special note on that, when we eat greens like this, we can take them and actually cook them at room temperature by just taking the greens, slicing them thin, putting them in a bowl, sprinkling a little bit of sea salt on them, and with your hand, massage them so they turn bright green. They're actually easier to digest once they've had that color shift. So if you get a bright, you know, a kale salad in front of you and it's still the color the kale was when you rinsed it off, give it a little bit of fermenting time, either put some vinegar on it or, like I said, some sea salt, toss it, let it sit a few minutes till you see that color shift. That bright green is almost kind of like, bing, I'm ready, you can eat me now. So it's good to go. So I am just waiting for my water to come up to a boil over here on my steamer. But to get greens a brighter green, we can steam them. We can water saute them. You could do a light oil saute, just a little bit of oil in the bottom of the pan to start with. Start off with maybe like an onion and some garlic. Get those nice and cooked, translucent with the onions and the garlic all nice and juicy and cooked up with a little bit of sea salt, and then pop those greens into the pan for about 30 seconds. Maybe toss a little bit of tamari or shoyu in there real quick, and boom, get them out of the pan. You can make delicious, simple greens really easily. It doesn't take a lot of time. It's usually the thing I'm doing right before I am ready to serve food. So my water's almost boiling over there. I'm doing another check on my congee over here, which is getting nice and thick. I'm just giving that another little stir here. Starting to thicken nicely. I'm going to add some more water to that. I'm basically pushing this to really break down quickly by using this method. Like I said, congees, you can start off with a lot of water to start and cook it down slowly. This is more of a method I use during the summers so that I don't have it going for 2-3 hours to get it super, super creamy. This is also a really great food for when people are having growing pains. If you have anyone, a young child who's developing, teething even when their teeth are coming in, we can take the cream from this congee. We can literally separate the cream off the top of it, add more water to it, and make it drinkable, and make a rice cream to help with creating this really nurturing dish for building bones. And, you know, I mean, come on, this is whole grains building pretty much everything that us humans are kind of made out of. So I'm almost to the steaming point here. It's seriously thinking about it, but it's not there yet. So I'm going to give that another second. And while I'm doing that, I am going to show you guys how simple and how easy it is to make a fresh dressing. Now, I used to be like everybody else. Many years ago, I used to have a lineup inside of my refrigerator door that was all of the different dressings that I loved, from green goddess to Italian dressings. And then one day I learned how to make dressings, and I went, oh my gosh, is it really this simple? Because this is even better than what I'm buying, and it's fresher. If we want real vitality from our foods, we need to eat fresh food. If we want a good balance of foods in front of us from the natural world, then we want to look for a rainbow of colors. And within the range of all of the different nuts and seeds, we have all different kinds of colors. There's different shades and shapes and sizes. And in the different nuts and seeds that we have, we can make beautiful dressings out of those, basically using these as the oil in our dressing. We can also do this with a nut butter, so a peanut butter, a tahini, any one of those, cashew butter. Have some fun with it. Now I'm going to make a sunflower seed dressing. So I got sunflower seeds here. I'm going to really wait till you guys see how simple this is. I'm going to add my seeds to the blender. I tend to blend my seeds dry first. Now, there's a flavor variation I can do on this, and also if you have trouble digesting nuts and seeds, dry roast the seeds first. Literally take a dry skillet saute pan and rinse your seeds, put them in the dry pan, medium-high heat, just roast them lightly. You're cooking them, making them easier to digest, which will make the dressing easier to digest if you have any trouble with digesting seeds. Now, we're going to pulverize these seeds. So what I'm going to do first is, before I turn this into a dressing, I'm going to blend it, and I'm going to make these seeds into kind of like a powder or flour. So I'm going to get noisy here for 1 second. I noticed that my steamer is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put those stems in first. So they're on the bottom. I'm taking my leaves of my greens and putting those on top. This is about 1 layer thick. Just going to cover that up, and keep in mind, I want to get that out of there fairly quick. So this is not the time to go photo load the laundry or do anything like that. Now, in my blender over here with my dried, pulverized sunflower seeds, I'm just ripping up a scallion and throwing that in. And I'm checking on my greens. I'm gonna give it like 5 more seconds. They've shifted color. They're almost ready. Do you guys see how quick this is? They're in and out of that steamer. They shifted, the color's nice and bright green. Those leaves are done. We don't want khaki colored, long cooked greens. We want them short cooked. That vital green color that we see there, that's that chlorophyll, that liquid sunshine that we want to have. So we want to keep that bright green there. So I'm just moving those over to the side. I'm just going to let them cool till the stems are ready to cut them. In the meantime, I got scallions and I got my sunflower seeds in here. I'm going to add some parsley to this one too. Just a bunch of it, the whole thing, just whoop, in it goes. So that is going back on my blender. And with that, I'm going to add this lovely vinegar called umeboshi vinegar. Now, umeboshi vinegar is a more alkaline kind of a vinegar. So if people have a rough time with vinegar, this can be a very nice vinegar for people. It's not as rough on their digestive systems. Now, I'm just checking on my stems to see if they're done real quick. They need another minute or so. They're not tender enough yet. I'm going to throw some ume vinegar into my blender here, and I usually will add like, about a tablespoon to a cup, I would say, if, to a cup of dressing overall. It can be a little salty, add more water. I honestly put it in, my intuition just tells me when to stop. So this is a saltier than most vinegars, okay? So we're gonna go a little light-handed in a dressing on this than we are with a brown rice vinegar. So for instance here, I had about a half a cup of seeds. I would say I just added there a little over a tablespoon of the umeboshi vinegar to it. But like I said, add a little bit, taste it. You don't need a lot of umeboshi vinegar. A little bit goes a long way. It's very strong. It has a wonderful, salty, sweet, kind of pungent flavor to it. It's delicious. Then I'm just going to add a little bit of water, pretty much enough just to start with, to cover the seeds. Not a lot to start. I always like to start with a little and then add some, see where I'm at, because we can never go back, right? You can't unadd too much water. Add a little bit more water. And I'm just adding enough water to the desired consistency. So if you like a nice, thick dressing, then add less water. If you like a dressing that's a little thinner, add more water. You can have fun with it. There's no rules with it. It's not rocket science, and it's not baking. We're cooking. So I always inspire people to go into your kitchen and have some fun with it. Once you've cooked a base whole grain and you've cooked a base plant-based bean, legume of some kind, protein that you're working with, the rest of your meals are going to pretty much consist of your vegetable balance. So I encourage you to use a rainbow of colors. Yes?
I have a question. Do you ever soak your seeds?
Yes. I will soak my seeds if I'm going to do something with them where I want them really creamy. Like let's say I'm going to make a dressing with them and I want it to be like a real creamy dressing and my blender's not that great. I used to soak stuff all the time. And then one day someone gave me a Vitamix and it became a whole nother world. Actually, we bought this Vitamix, didn't we? We got the juicer that was the gift. Yeah. And if you guys ever need a juicer, we do vegetable juicing. That's another great healing tool is vegetable juicing. And notice I'm using the word vegetable. The only fruits that we typically use in healing and juicing are like the lemon, which is more alkaline than acidic when juiced, but we don't juice fruit. And the reason for that is because fructose and fiber need to stay together to be beneficial in the body. So when we do fruits in a healing protocol, we're typically using fruit in a cooked form or a raw form or some form that's whole, not separated from the fiber. So vegetable juicing is very good for liver cleansing and all kinds of just cleansing overall. Greens juice is made from kale and collards. You can do it with, you know, herbs put in there, cilantro and parsley, cucumbers. There is one fruit that we can juice that kind of breaks the rules. That's the green apple, the sour one. Now, the liver really likes the flavor of sour, and it kind of forgives the green apple and allows the green apple to still work as a whole fruit in its juice form. It's one of the ones that breaks the rules for juicing. So we just suggest to people, if you're going to juice, stick to more vegetables, green apple and lemon being pretty much the only fruit if you're going to juice them, but use your fruits whole. So if you're going to drink your fruit, do a smoothie. Got the fiber intact, it's better for you in that way. But yes, soaking, especially if you have a blender that's not doing a really great job of pulverizing things. Many years ago, I had a different blender and I just couldn't get things smooth. When I got my first Vitamix, it was just a world of difference. And you don't need the models that have every single bell and whistle on them to do basic cooking. The base models do a great job. So if you don't want to invest in one with all the bells and whistles, that base model is what I have, and it works fabulous. So back over to my little greens dish here. Basically, I've got my greens here. I just cut them all up nice and see how nice and bright green those are. I'm going to go ahead and put some dressing on top of that. Now, I let my dressing sit for a minute or two, and it's continued to thicken, okay? This is gonna happen with your seed dressings. I'm gonna put it back on the blender for a second and add a little bit more water to this, because right now, if I wanted like a cream to sit on top of a grain dish from this dressing, it'd be perfect. It would sit up nice and firm like a cream. Now, all these seed dressings, seeds are new life. They are some of the most rich forms of phytonutrients on the planet. They are that new life that if we soak a seed in water, it sprouts a new plant. Can you do that screen? And so we can sprout nuts and seeds. We can do lots of sprouting from these new life forms. We can make delicious dressings with them. I personally like to just roast nuts and seeds fresh and keep a little bowl out on the counter of like pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds for when I've cruised into the kitchen and I'm just looking for a little something to munch on. It keeps me out of the other stuff. And it's a really good source of phytonutrients, protein, and those building blocks in food that we're looking for to rejuvenate all this kind of stuff. So here's our little beautiful greens dish with our dressing on top of it, nice and creamy. Now, if any of you crave creaminess, creaminess really helps us relax. That's why so many of us, Patrick, can you put the side camera on? That's why so many of us crave creamy foods, comfort foods. Think about a lot of them. Creaminess, okay? This is a great way to get some creaminess into your diet, and it's a really good protein source too. We just made this from sunflower seeds. So this little simple salad that we made here, there's protein in the kale, there's protein in the dressing. So when somebody asks you, what do you mean you're eating all plant-based? Where are you gonna get your protein? Let me tell you, it's everywhere in the plant-based world. The basis of all these plants is protein. Now we are in our last little bit of the class here. I'm coming over to my congee to see where it is. And it is thickening up nicely. Now I'm going to add a little more water to this. And I'm also going to cut some fresh veggies to go into this because this is in the last part of the cooking for me here. We're basically creating a nice creamy rice porridge. Okay, and I'm going to add some onion to this, which is one of the sweet vegetables. If you have sweet cravings, one of the things that you can do, Patrick, one of the things that you can do with sweet cravings is actually, look at this monitor, is actually eat sweet vegetables. Sweet vegetables like onion and kabocha, carrot, corn, and also, oh, I missed one, cabbage, have a relaxing quality in the body. They can also help with blood sugar regulation. So I'm going to put some in the congee here. I'm just going to go ahead and dice up some of this to stick in there. And I'm just going to go ahead and add that to the pot. And I'm also going to go ahead and cut up some of this lovely kabocha squash. Now, if you're not familiar with this, these kabocha squash are absolutely delicious. We're going to leave the skin on the outside. In Whole Foods cooking, we leave the whole thing intact, okay? Unless something has a peel on it, we don't peel it. A banana has a peel, it naturally peels off. Even in nature, a monkey who eats the banana will actually peel the banana. But there's no peel on this one, so we're gonna leave it intact. And you know, what we want to take into consideration is the vitamins and minerals and the phytonutrients are making different colors. So the vitamins that are in this outside green area are going to be different than what's inside in the orange area. There's more sugary sweet part of this plant on the inside. There's more of those vitamins on the outside. So we want to use the whole thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a chunk of this. And that too is going to go in my congee. This will be nice and relaxing, help with any stress. It's going to sweeten the dish a little bit too. So it's going to be very comforting overall. I just gave it a thin cut so it cooks quickly. And that's going into the pot. I'm going to give that a quick stir. So in Gordon's class earlier today, he was talking about mushrooms and how medicinal different mushrooms can be for us in healing. And based on what he was talking about earlier, I went ahead and just pulled some of the different types of supplemental mushrooms that I have that are in the dried form in my cupboard. Now we use quite a bit of dried mushrooms, which is why I don't have any dried shiitake right now because yesterday I used them up. But some of the things that we can show you is like what Gordon was talking about earlier when he was saying that he adds some of these mushroom dried supplements that are powders into dishes. We could take some of this maitake mushroom powder here and put it into the congee. We could add it to that if we're out of dried mushrooms or fresh mushrooms and we want to add mushrooms for helping with cleansing and nurturing the body and boosting the immune system, then we could do it in this form too. Here's another popular one he was talking about earlier, turkey tail. It's another good one, easy to add into things in this form. And one of the things that we're going to do with our congee is when the vegetables are cooked, I'm going to add miso to the end of the cooking process with this congee. So I'm going to add a fermented food to it. Now, fermented foods are in most, I haven't seen fermented foods not in a healing diet yet. So fermented foods are a part of a healing diet and an important part of a healing diet for most of us. Because most of us were raised with more of a standard American diet. So we were raised with a lot of highly processed foods and hardly any natural fermented foods on their own. People like me developed candida over the years and severe cases of it because their digestion gets undermined with the wrong kinds of bacteria and stuff. And how do people like me get back to having a healthy gut again? They can benefit from these fermented foods. Now, we make our own probiotics in our body if we eat prebiotic foods, which are your vegetables, your grains, your nuts, your seeds, all those natural growing whole foods. If we eat those, we can make our own probiotics, but that can take a little time for some of us, for the body to get to that point. So to speed up healthy bacteria balance in the gut, what we can do is use foods that are already fermented and have that healthy, rich, natural bacteria in the food itself. So I'm going to add miso today to our actual congee. And the miso that I'm adding is a red barley miso. Now, these darker misos tend to have a little bit stronger effect than the whiter, lighter misos. The darker misos also create a little more heat in the body. So if you really need to ignite somebody's digestion and kind of kickstart it and get it going, these are a little more powerful. They're both good. Now, there are all kinds of misos. The ones that are really healthy for you, you're going to find them in the refrigerator section, or they're going to be in a container that's completely sealed off, and then once you open it, goes into the refrigerator because they are live, living, breathing bacteria. They'll continue to ferment if left at room temperature. So the good misos are going to be refrigerated once they're ready to go. This one here has been fermented for at least a couple of years. So what I'm going to do when I go to add this to the congee is I'm going to want to dilute it first before I add it into the congee, or I'm going to have just a lump of congee floating around in there. And usually the last person who gets a bowl of the congee will find that chunk of miso and make a funny face because they have a whole bunch of salts in their mouth all at one time. And I don't like to shock people that way, so I always try to dilute my miso before I add it to anything. And I don't have a lot of liquid in my pot right now, so I'm just going to take some basic, just good old water. And I'm going to just take a minute to break this down and dilute it so that it is easier to mix into the congee and spreads out throughout the congee nicely, so there's no lumps of miso floating around in there. So it'll take you a second. Now, some misos, one of my favorite is a South River brand miso. It'll have chunks of actual soybeans in it. It's cool stuff. This time of year they don't ship, it's too hot, but in the fall I will be reloading. We are lucky enough to find it locally too. Mitoku is another really good brand of miso, as well as Osawa, another excellent one. One real popular one you can find in most stores is called Miso Master. That's a good one too. You want to look for organic, like anything else. I'm adding my miso in here. I got a little bit in my dish still here. I want all of that, so I'm just giving it a quick little rinse here. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my flame. No more boiling when I add the miso. Just turn the flame off. This is really hot. It'll cook in the last few minutes here. and I have a nice creamy congee. Now, this is super hot right now, and it's the most liquid it's going to be because as it cools off, this is going to get more and more thick. It's going to thicken as it cools. So if you're going to make a batch that you're going to reheat and you pull it out the next day and it's really like solid, like a loaf of congee, just add more water. It's one of the beautiful things about making a dressing this way or making a soup or a congee. If something's too thick, you just add more water. Simple enough. So I see that we are getting close to the top of the hour here.
No questions.
There's no questions. Everybody's doing good. If you have any questions, you want to pick my brain, ask me something, this would be your opportune time to do that. If not, I'll just keep talking about food because I can do that all day long. So another thing that is really nice to have in your kitchen for natural healing. This is kokicha tea. I have some of the twigs here so you can see that up close. Nope, not on that camera. How about this camera? This one still got it. These are twigs. This is basically the branches of the green tea plant. So these little guys here are little tiny twigs, okay? They're the branches of the green tea plant that have been taken, cut up, and dried. This is a more potent version of kokicha tea than in the tea bags. It's just a stronger way of kind of making your kokicha tea is from the twigs itself. Both are good, but honestly, at home, mostly what I do it with is the twigs itself, and I will just fill a pot with water, sprinkle some over the top, bring it to a boil, turn it down to low, simmer it for 15 to 20 minutes. You can get 2 pots out of 1 pass of those twigs. After the first time, just strain them, dry them, use them again the next day or a couple days later. And I just leave a pot of kokicha tea out on the countertop with a sushi mat over the top of it. It's tea, it's not going to go bad. There's nothing in it that's going to ferment or anything within 24 or even 48 hours. So I just leave it out and go through it. Now, what are those benefits of kokicha tea? It's a natural tonifier. It is alkaline. So if you're stressed out and you're starting to just feel, you know, your stomach is just starting to do that acid kind of thing, you're not feeling great, some kokicha tea can calm that down. If you are really stressed and even have like skin breakouts that are happening from stress, you can drink the tea and use it topically. It works as a tonifier on the inside and the out. It's a natural astringent and it's antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. It can help in so many ways. So another quick and easy thing you can do, drink a cup of tea.
3 quick questions. First quick question is, what brand is your vegetable knife?
My vegetable knife here is a brand that's an NHS knife. I bought this when I first started cooking a plant-based diet, got myself a real veggie knife because I realized I didn't know how to cut anything when I was first getting started, and I highly recommend getting a good sharp knife. Now this is a square or blade. It's called a Yusuba. These are primarily for cutting vegetables. I really like the way that this knife handles over a more traditional chef knife like my husband uses, which has the pointy tip on it. This one I find is a better feel for me. So find a knife that works for you and keep it sharp. We have less accidents when we have a sharp knife.
All right. Then the 2-part question. Can you soak rice and beans at room temperature overnight, or should it be only in the refrigerator? Secondly, comments about the if you don't have a gas burner, and if you're using also the flame detector on heat, on electric burners.
Mm-hmm. So the first part was?
Second one is like, can you soak rice and
yes.
beans at room temperature?
Soaking, all of the rice and grain soaking is at room temperature. We don't need to do it in the refrigerator. You could if it's really, really, really hot. But honestly, even when it's 85 degrees in my house and you're only soaking overnight, it's not a problem. Even if it is warm, it'll make it more digestible quicker. 6 to 8 hours when it's hot out is plenty of soaking time. So you could even do it in the morning for that evening if you're not using air conditioning and your house is hotter. But room temperature will do it for soaking your grains and beans. And the next part was...
Can you comment if you don't have a gas burner?
If you don't have a gas burner. Okay. So there's plenty of people these days who are using, for instance, cooking their grains with a rice cooker, different things like that. If you don't have a gas burner, in all honesty, however you get it done. If you have an electric stove and it's all you have access to make your grains and beans, it's better than not making your grains and beans. There is, when we get into really advanced medicinal cooking, when we have people with really extreme cases that are very far advanced, and we are doing everything in our power to reverse the condition, then ideally, yes, we want to use fire for cooking the food and not electric. But for everyday use, for most people in generally good health, however you get it done. And a flame tamer can help on an electric stove just as much as it can help on a gas stove. I've seen some electric stoves not go low enough, and a flame tamer can help with that too. So play around with it a little bit. You just want to maintain a really low simmer when the flame tamer's underneath there for a properly cooked grain.
Right, and last quick one, what are the benefits of azuki bean tea?
Azuki bean tea is really great for tonifying the kidneys and nurturing the kidneys. So let's say we have that pooling of water in the bags underneath our eyes, or we have those dark circles underneath our eyes. The kidneys are tired, they're exhausted, or they're overwhelmed with too much fluid in the system. Azuki bean tea can be very helpful in moving that water in the body, getting it moving and helping the kidneys strengthen so it can kind of get a little extra boost to do so. So azuki bean tea is really easy to make. We just take our azuki beans, we bring them up to a boil. We do it with the, extra water, so maybe 1 cup of beans to 5 or 6 cups of water. Bring it to a boil, turn it down to low, simmer it for 45 minutes. Honestly, I like to go longer. I really cook it when I do azuki bean tea. Then you can just take the beans out, use them for something else, eat them, take your liquid, put a little bit of tamari or shoyu in that, or sea salt, and you've got your tea. 1 cup a day in between meals over the course of 5 days, brightens the eyes, helps with the bags under the eyes. It can also help with that lower back pain that we can get with adrenal fatigue and stuff. And the kidneys are overtaxed and we're just doing too much from stress and the kidneys start to hurt and we start rolling our shoulders. That's when azuki bean tea is really good. It helps you get those kidneys tonified, get that swelling down, you can stand up straight again, and you feel better, less doubts, less questioning of things when you get those kidneys nice and strong. So you can use azuki beans for that. Thanks for asking that question.
And is it on the questions? And we're all right on time.
Well, thank you everybody for attending class. We are going to post a bunch of recipes, Patrick and I, as a team, when we do the library follow-up. And we have the videos that you will all get after the end of the event. We're going to give you a bunch of recipes to play with. So I hope you had a great class today. Look forward to seeing you in some of the other classes for the rest of today and the rest of this event. And have a great day.